Thanks, Soren. Thank you. Thanks, Jon and Soren and Jon. And well, my response to the formal close of it is all good things must come to an end. And I'm taking with me what I've got out of it and really glad for what I have got and not for what I won't get if it continued on further, if you know what I mean. So
I love what you're saying, and I know what you mean.
it's always been my approach, you know, always wanted more children, but I always said, well, be grateful for what you have, not for what you haven't. So so thanks for that. And I'm calling from just outside Belfast, in the north of Ireland. And yeah, my question is around the interface of practice and life and this term mindfulness that I can't remember his name. He was on a couple of nights ago and he talked about once we name it as a thing, it becomes a thing. And I'm recently a mindfulness meditation teacher, having taken early retirement from the sector of community work for over 35 years. And I suppose what my struggle is, and you did mention, you know, confusion, and we can bring that onto the mat with us in terms of COVID. And this is something I've been bringing on to the mat with me. And I just really would like your reflections on it in terms of where mindfulness ends and life begins, as in the whole of our life. I have done a lot of contemplative retreats and would have read awareness around Tony DeMello and people like that years and years ago. But I think what really has confused me this past week has been, you know, a seminar that I was at, and they said, what brought you to mindfulness? And I got very confused, you know, in terms of what I define mindfulness as being. Some of the richest moments that have made my heart sing the most have been in meeting people of difference, and seeing the pain and the, excuse me, the prejudice that is brought to life on people in terms of their ethnicity or colour, sexuality, whether they're Catholic or Protestant or Hindu or Muslim or whatever. And it brought me in 2 years of working in a community where I did become an inclusion officer for equity, diversity and interdependence, and have now been training in mindfulness. So yeah, so how big is our hearts? Well, our hearts can be so big enough to make us ill trying to do as much. But I suppose my question, Jon, is in terms of, you know, answering that question, what brought me to mindfulness as a program? And I know I was brought to MBSR through illness, but in terms of mindfulness to life, from I was a very young age, you know, being exposed to people from all sorts of different life conditions. And my first job was working in a children's home, which I often said was the best grounding for me in life, to see the types of different families and, you know, taken for granted coming up in a family of love and care and nothing complicated. And the lives of young people that I would have seen were hugely different. And so my awareness would have been raised through living and being with those people. And I was fortunate to be with young people in New York, and they took me on their peer program to Rikers Island when all the young people in Rikers Island were all Black.
Explain to people what Rikers Island is for those who may not know New York City.
Yeah, Rikers Island is a prison for younger people. And I went over as a community worker and met up with a group of young people that were doing peer education on Rikers Island, which was the prison for young people. And we went into the prison to do the peer education drama, and the last young people to one in Rikers Island was Black. And that awareness through experience just begged the question, it's just in front of your eyes, there's something structurally wrong, because this just cannot be the way of life. And just listening to the stories are not the stories that are perpetrated in the papers, they're the real life stories. So So basically my question is, now having moved into the mindfulness community, in terms of expressing what mindfulness is and what mindfulness isn't, certainly in an MBSR course, I can get that. I can totally understand that. In this forum where we're looking more at the interplay between mindfulness, meditation and life, I just would like to hear your reflections on that.
Okay, well, you said a lot. If I'm not mistaken, Soren, is it true that you worked on Rikers Island for a bit?
Yeah, at the for the young people section, actually.
Yeah, the young people section.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, it's a prison in the East River that is just a hellhole on earth. And very, very hard to transform. And this is what we do with our youth. So the levels of pain and suffering that you're pointing to, and it's certainly not just on that one island in the East River. It's in Ireland. It's in Northern Ireland. I mean, the hell realms on this planet are everywhere in a certain way, and very often the children are, suffer the most from these kinds of levels of ignorance, and ignorance taken to such a degree that could only be called institutional evil. It's a big question, and I don't really have anything particular to say beyond what I've been, offering here. And that is that mindfulness is really a love affair with what's deepest and best in ourselves, not in a sort of narcissistic, self-centered way, but in exactly the opposite. And it's obvious, I mean, in the way you are speaking, the emotion that's behind what you're saying is that you yourself have been engaged in this love affair in whatever ways that you have been able to for decades. And there's the rending element to it, because you can't force the world to be other than it is. But at the same time, your presence can be tremendously healing to even one person. That's already made a huge difference in the world. And if you can also have some kind of structural difference and make a difference in terms of like the system or the institutions that perpetrate this kind of thing, and the mindsets that actually develop those institutions and the laws that support it, then that's the process of healing that we're all collaborating in at this moment. And there's certain moments on the planet that are what you might call kind of, what the theoretical physicists might call wormholes, that you can actually, drop into particular moments and make much larger differences in the world than at other times when things seem to be in a certain kind of stasis. And no matter how much you give voice to issues of justice or compassion or kindness, the world just does not seem to respond. Now seems to be a moment when, because of the pandemic and the recognition that we're all in this together in a certain way, I think there are entirely new ways in which your heart and all of our hearts will find to do not what someone else's work is, not what someone else's karmic assignment is, so to speak, or not what your karmic assignment of 5 minutes or 20 years ago was, but what is your karmic assignment? What is my karmic assignment right in this moment? And you don't have to have a conceptual answer to that. All you need to do is hold that question and let the love speak to you in the timeless, so that you don't have an agenda or a time frame for acting in the direction that you want to take action in. And that kind of selfless commitment, it doesn't burn out. There's a big difference between empathy. People often speak of compassion fatigue, but it's not compassion, if it's truly understood and embodied, doesn't fatigue because there's no one there to fatigue. But empathy, carrying the feeling of the suffering of others, that we can only tolerate to a certain degree. So we need empathy that sort of is held in mindfulness and heartfulness, and out of that arises the instinct to, the impulse to actually carry some of the burden in one way or another, but there's no you to carry the burden, so it actually doesn't fatigue. And we share it all together. And that's one of the things that I think we're feeling on this, in this Sangha, in this community, is that we are truly all in it together. But that's one thing when you think it, but it's another thing when you can see it in the faces of people, even on thumbnail, sort of things on our screens. It's kind of remarkable. So one, I just want to thank you for your the expressions of both pain and possibility that you've given voice to, and thanks for being part of this community. I mean, your country, if you are from Northern Ireland, has seen plenty of suffering, plenty of othering. So, we have lessons to learn here, and lessons that we can learn from each other. And so it doesn't matter what your definition of mindfulness is. What really matters is that you're living a life of integrity, ethics, caring, and that in some sense you have befriended your own mind and heart to the point of view that you don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Jon, because I was struggling with the concepts, but the heart speaks to me the easiest.
Throw out the concepts. I mean, they're just concepts.
Yeah.
And I tell you, a lot of reporters and people say, look, I love your concept of mindfulness. And I go, oh my God, where do I have to start? Because as soon as people think of it as a concept, they've already killed it. Yeah. It's not a concept. It's a way of being. And if people need more, it's a way of being in wise relationship with the actuality of things. And what does wisdom mean? Well, it means ethics, and it means compassion, and it means insight.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And no one has a lock on it. No one has a monopoly on that. Yeah. No one.
Thanks, Jon, and thanks everyone else for listening. Thanks, Soren.
Thank you, Sinead.